The rain drummed against the windows of Meridian, Manhattan's newest fine dining establishment, as Imani Carter checked her reflection one last time in the restroom mirror. Her natural curls were perfectly defined, and the burgundy dress she'd borrowed from her roommate Maya hugged her curves in all the right places, though she couldn't help but wince at the price tag she'd glimpsed when Maya wasn't looking. "You got this, girl," she whispered to herself, adjusting the vintage gold necklace that had been her grandmother's. The job interview at the nonprofit had run long, and now she was 20 minutes late for a blind date she'd never wanted in the first place. But Maya had been relentless. "Imani, you haven't been on a date since Marcus, and that was 8 months ago. Dr. James Patterson is perfect for you, successful, stable, and he actually reads books." Imani hurried through the restaurant, past tables where couples spoke in hushed tones over wine that probably cost more than her monthly Metro card. The maitre d' raised an eyebrow at her slightly breathless appearance. "Table 12, she said, remembering Maya's careful instructions. "I'm meeting someone," the maitre d' nodded toward the back corner. "Right this way, miss." But as Imani navigated between tables, her mind was elsewhere, replaying the nonprofit interview, wondering if she'd answered the question about educational equity the right way. Thinking about the student loan payment that was due next week, she spotted what she thought was table 12 and slid into the seat across from a man who had his back to her. "I am so sorry I'm late," she said, slightly out of breath. "The interview ran over, and then the subway was—" The man turned around, and Imani's words died in her throat. This definitely wasn't Dr. James Patterson, the 40-something literature professor Maya had described. This man was younger, maybe early 30s, with warm brown eyes behind stylish glasses, and a smile that made her forget why she'd been nervous. "No worries at all," he said, his voice carrying a slight rasp that sent an unexpected flutter through her chest. "I actually just got here myself." Imani blinked, confusion washing over her. She glanced around, realizing she might have made a mistake with the table numbers. But before she could say anything, the waiter appeared. "Mr. Cole, the wine you ordered," the server said, presenting a bottle with ceremonial flair. "Perfect, thank you," the man, Mr. Cole, replied, then looked at Imani with those impossibly warm eyes. "I hope you don't mind red wine." Every rational thought told Imani to speak up, to explain the mistake. But something about his genuine smile, the way he looked at her like she was exactly who he'd been hoping to meet, made her nod instead. "Red wine is perfect. I'm Everett," he said, extending his hand across the table. "Imani," she replied, feeling a jolt of electricity when their fingers touched. "So, Imani," Everett said as the waiter poured their wine, "tell me about this interview that made you late. Must have been important." This was her moment to confess, to explain she was supposed to be at a different table meeting a different person. Instead, she found herself leaning forward, genuinely interested in talking to this stranger. "It was for a position with Bridges Educational Foundation," she said. "They work with underserved communities to improve literacy rates and college readiness. It's something I'm passionate about." Everett's eyes lit up with genuine interest, not the polite attention most men gave when she talked about her work. "That sounds incredible. What drew you to education?" And just like that, they were talking. Really talking. Not the stilted small talk of a first date, but the kind of conversation that made you lose track of time. "I grew up in Bed-Stuy," Imani found herself saying, surprised by how comfortable she felt sharing with him. "My mom worked 2 jobs, cleaning offices at night, stocking shelves during the day. But she always made time to read with my sister and me. She'd say, 'Baby girl, education is the one thing nobody can take from you.'" Everett listened intently, asking follow-up questions that showed he was truly engaged. When she mentioned having to take out loans for her master's degree in education, he nodded with understanding, not judgment. "My mom would have loved you," Everett said softly after she'd shared a funny story about her mother's determination to get her daughters into good schools. There was a note of sadness in his voice that made Imani pause. "Would have? She passed away 3 years ago. Cancer." Everett's fingers tightened around his wine glass. "She was a teacher too, actually. 3rd grade. Used to say that every child who walked into her classroom was someone's whole world." The vulnerability in his voice made Imani's chest tighten with unexpected emotion. Without thinking, she reached across the table and placed her hand over his. "She sounds like she was an amazing woman." "She was," Everett said, his eyes meeting hers with an intensity that made her breath catch. Thank you for saying that. They sat like that for a moment, hands touching across the table, and Imani felt something shift inside her chest. A recognition, like coming home to a place she'd never been before. What about you? She asked softly. What do you do when you're not? Having dinner with women who show up late? Everett hesitated for just a moment, and Imani caught something flicker across his face. I work in tech, software development mostly. It's not as exciting as improving literacy rates. Don't sell yourself short, Imani said with a smile that made Everett's pulse quicken. Someone has to keep the world's apps running. They talked for another hour, about books they loved, places they wanted to travel, dreams that felt too big to say out loud. Everett told her about his love for old movies and how he'd rather spend a Saturday night at a revival theater than at some trendy club. Imani shared her secret ambition to write children's books someday, stories that would show kids who looked like her that they could be anything. That's not secret ambition, Everett said, leaning forward. That's a calling. It was only when Imani's phone buzzed insistently that she remembered the outside world existed. Maya's text flashed on the screen. How's it going with Dr. Patterson? He texted me saying you never showed up. Imani's stomach dropped as reality crashed back in. She looked around the restaurant, finally noticing they were sitting at table 13, not 12. Oh my God, she whispered, covering her face with her hands. I sat at the wrong table. Everett's eyebrows shot up, but instead of looking annoyed, he started laughing, a rich, warm sound that made other diners turn their heads. So you're not Sarah Chen, the marketing executive my business partner set me up with? No, Imani said, peeking through her fingers. I'm just Imani Carter, the master's student who apparently can't read table numbers. Well, just Imani Carter, Everett said, raising his wine glass. This has been the best wrong table I've ever sat at. Before Imani could respond, a woman's voice cut through their bubble of intimacy. Everett Cole? They both turned to see an impeccably dressed Asian woman approaching their table, her smile sharp as a blade. She was stunning in the way that came from having the money for the best personal trainers, skincare, and stylists. Everything Imani couldn't afford. Sarah, Everett said, standing politely, but without enthusiasm. You're an hour late, I know. The merger meeting ran forever. Sarah's eyes swept over Imani dismissively before focusing back on Everett. I see you found someone to keep you company. Imani felt heat rise in her cheeks as she registered the condescension in Sarah's tone. She started to stand, to make her excuses and disappear, but Everett's hand gently touched her wrist. Sarah, this is Imani Carter. Imani, Sarah Chen. Charming, Sarah said with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. I'm sorry to interrupt your conversation, but we should probably get to our table, Everett. I have some exciting news about the Nexus deal. The mention of Nexus made something flicker across Everett's face, but Imani was too caught up in her own embarrassment to notice. It's fine, she said quickly, gathering her purse. I should go find my actual date. Or what's left of him. Imani, wait! Everett started, but she was already moving toward the exit, her cheeks burning with humiliation. Outside, the rain had stopped, but the street still gleamed with reflected neon. Imani pulled out her phone and called Maya as she walked toward the subway. Girl, where have you been? Dr. Patterson waited for 45 minutes. I sat at the wrong table and ended up having dinner with some guy named Everett Cole, Imani said, dodging a puddle. Maya, I made such a fool of myself. His actual date showed up, and she was this gorgeous, successful businesswoman who made me feel like... Wait, Maya interrupted. Did you say Everett Cole, as in Cole Technologies? Imani, do you have any idea who that is? Imani stopped walking. What are you talking about? Everett Cole founded one of the biggest software companies in the city. He's been on the cover of Forbes, TechCrunch. Girl, he's probably worth millions. The words hit Imani like a physical blow. She leaned against a streetlight, suddenly understanding the expensive restaurant, the casual way he'd ordered that wine, the deference the staff had shown him. Oh God, Maya. I spent 2 hours telling a millionaire about my student loans and my dead-end tutoring job. What did he say about it? Imani closed her eyes, remembering how intently Everett had listened, how he'd asked thoughtful questions, how he'd never once made her feel small or insignificant. He seemed interested. But now I know why. He probably felt sorry for me. Or, Maya said gently, he liked you. Rich guys are still guys, Imani, and you're pretty amazing. But Imani couldn't shake the image of Sarah Chen, polished, confident, moving in Everett's world with ease. Everything Imani wasn't. By the time she got home to the small apartment she shared with Maya in Harlem, Imani had convinced herself that the evening had been a fluke, a brief intersection of two worlds that were never meant to meet. She changed into sweatpants and was settling in with a cup of tea when her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "This is Everett. I got your number from the restaurant. I hope that's okay. I wanted to apologize for how the evening ended. Would you like to have coffee tomorrow? Just coffee, just us. No wrong tables, no interruptions." Imani stared at the message, her heart doing complicated things in her chest. Before she could talk herself out of it, she typed back, "Coffee sounds perfect. But next time, you're picking the table." His response came immediately, "Deal." And Imani, "Tonight was the best dinner I've had in years." The next morning found Imani at Grind Coffee, a small shop near Columbia where she sometimes studied. She'd chosen it deliberately, neutral territory, not too fancy, not too casual. She arrived 10 minutes early and ordered her usual, large coffee, 1 sugar, splash of oat milk. Everett walked in exactly on time, wearing jeans and a navy sweater that made his eyes even warmer. Seeing him in daylight in this ordinary setting made him seem more real somehow, less like the tech mogul Maya had Googled and more like the man who'd listened to her talk about education for 2 hours. "No wine this time," he said with a smile as he ordered black coffee and joined her at a corner table. "Probably safer," Imani replied, feeling some of her nervousness ease. "Less chance of me saying something embarrassing." "You didn't say anything embarrassing last night. You were. You were real. Do you know how rare that is?" There was something in his voice, a vulnerability that made Imani look at him more closely. "What do you mean?" Everett sighed, running a hand through his hair. "When you're in my position, people always want something. Investors want money, employees want promotions, women want—" He trailed off, shaking his head. "Sorry, that sounds incredibly arrogant." "No," Imani said softly. "It sounds lonely." The simple understanding in her voice hit Everett harder than he'd expected. Most people either envied his success or tried to minimize it. No one had ever acknowledged the isolation that came with it. "It can be," he admitted. "But last night you had no idea who I was, and you still. You talked to me like I was just a person." You are just a person," Imani said. "A person who happens to be really successful at what you do. But underneath all that, you're still someone who misses his mom, and loves old movies and listens when people talk about things they care about." They talked for 2 hours, the coffee shop filling and emptying around them as the morning wore on. Everett told her about growing up in foster care after his father left and his mother got sick, how he'd taught himself to code in the public library, how every success still felt fragile, like it might disappear. "I know that feeling," Imani said. "Growing up, my mom used to say we were always one missed paycheck away from losing everything. Even now, with my degrees, I still feel like I'm borrowing someone else's life sometimes." "What changed?" Everett asked. "What made you decide to go into education despite the challenges?" Imani was quiet for a moment, stirring sugar into her 3rd cup of coffee. "There was this kid I tutored when I was getting my bachelor's. Marcus, 8 years old, lived with his grandmother in public housing. He was so bright, but the system was already failing him. Overcrowded classes, outdated textbooks, teachers who were too overwhelmed to see his potential." "What happened to him?" "I worked with him for 2 years, watched him go from barely reading at a 1st grade level to devouring chapter books. His grandmother cried when he won the school's reading competition." Imani's eyes grew distant. "That's when I knew. Every kid deserves someone in their corner, someone who sees what they could become." Everett watched her face light up as she talked and felt something shift in his chest, a certainty that surprised him with its intensity. "I want to fund it," he said suddenly. Imani blinked. "Fund what?" "Whatever program you create. The literacy initiative, the college prep, all of it. My foundation has been looking for education partners, and what you're talking about. It's exactly what communities need." "Everett, you can't just—" "I'm not offering because of last night," he interrupted, though that wasn't entirely true. "I'm offering because you're brilliant and passionate and you have a plan. Let me help you make it happen." Imani stared at him, overwhelmed. Part of her wanted to say yes immediately, the part that had watched too many bright kids slip through the cracks. that knew how much good they could do with proper funding. But another part, the part that had been raised to be suspicious of anything that seemed too good to be true, held her back. "I need to think about it," she said finally. "Of course." But Imani. Everett reached across the table, his fingers brushing hers. "This isn't charity. This is investment in something that matters." Over the next 2 weeks, they saw each other almost every day. Coffee dates became lunch dates, became long walks through Central Park. Everett introduced her to his favorite revival cinema, where they watched Casablanca and Vertigo and debated the endings over late-night diner food. Imani brought him to a community center in Bed-Stuy where she volunteered, watching him help third graders with their math. Homework with infinite patience. "You're good with them," she observed as they walked back to the subway afterward. "Kids don't care about your bank account," Everett replied. "They just want someone to pay attention to them." It was during their third week of whatever this was, not quite dating, more than friendship, that the first photograph appeared. A gossip blog had caught them leaving the movie theater together, Everett's hand on the small of Imani's back as he helped her into a taxi. Maya showed her the article over breakfast, her expression worried. "Tech mogul's new mystery woman," she read. "Everett Cole, founder of Cole Technologies, spotted with an unidentified companion." "Imani, they're already trying to figure out who you are." The attention made Imani deeply uncomfortable in a way she couldn't quite articulate. It wasn't that she was ashamed of being with Everett, the opposite, actually. But something about being reduced to a mystery woman in someone else's story felt wrong. When she mentioned it to Everett that evening, he was immediately contrite. "I'm sorry. I should have warned you this might happen. We can be more careful, go places where—" "I don't want to hide," Imani interrupted, "but I also don't want to be some curiosity for people to analyze." Everett pulled her closer on the couch in his Tribeca loft, a space that somehow managed to be both luxurious and cozy. "Then what do you want?" "I want this," she said, gesturing between them. "Whatever this is." "But I want it to be real, not some story people tell about the poor girl who got lucky." "Is that what you think this is?" Everett's voice was quiet, almost hurt. Imani turned to face him fully, seeing the genuine concern in his eyes. "No," she said softly, "but I'm scared that's what everyone else will think." "Your world. It's not mine, Everett, and I don't know if I want it to be." "What if we make our own world?" he asked, cupping her face gently. "What if we stop worrying about what other people think and focus on what we think?" Before she could answer, his phone rang. Everett glanced at the screen and frowned. "I should take this. It's about the Singapore expansion." He kissed her forehead quickly. "Give me 5 minutes?" As Everett stepped onto the balcony to take his call, Imani wandered around the loft, taking in details she'd been too nervous to notice before. Awards and recognitions covered one wall, but what caught her attention was a small framed photo on his desk, a younger Everett with a woman who had his same warm eyes. "That's my mom," he said, returning to find her studying the picture. "She looks like she gave the best hugs," Imani said. "She did." Everett's voice was thick with emotion. "She would have loved you. She always said I needed someone who would challenge me, keep me grounded." "Is that what I do?" "Among other things," he said, pulling her into his arms. "You make me remember who I am underneath all the business nonsense." They were interrupted by Everett's phone buzzing with a text. He glanced at it and his expression darkened. "What is it?" Imani asked. "Sarah Chen. She wants to meet tomorrow about some partnership opportunity." Everett set the phone aside firmly. "I'm going to tell her I'm not interested." "The partnership or the meeting?" "Both," he said without hesitation. And something in his certainty made Imani's chest flutter with hope. The next evening, Imani was grading papers at home when Maya burst through the door, laptop in hand. "We have a problem," she announced, setting the computer on their small dining table. "A big one." The headline made Imani's stomach drop. Everett Cole's education connection. Tech billionaire's new romance raises questions about nonprofit funding. The article was a masterpiece of innuendo, suggesting that Everett's foundation's interest in education initiatives was really about impressing his new girlfriend. It quoted sources close to the Cole Technologies board, expressing concern about mixing business with pleasure. "This is exactly what I was afraid of," Imani said, sinking into a chair. "Now everything he's trying to do for education looks suspect because of me." "Imani, this is clearly a hit piece," Maya said. "Someone wants to cause problems between you two." But Imani was already reaching for her phone, her decision made. She couldn't let her presence in Everett's life undermine work that could help so many kids. When Everett arrived an hour later, he found her sitting at the kitchen table, still in her tutoring clothes, looking like she'd been crying. "I saw the article," he said without preamble, sitting across from her. "My lawyers are already working on a response. This is Sarah. I know it is. She's been gunning for a partnership with Cole Technologies for months." "Maybe you should consider it," Imani said quietly. "What?" "The partnership. If being with me is causing problems for your business..." "Stop." Everett's voice was sharp. "Don't you dare let them win like this. It's not about winning or losing, Everett. It's about being realistic." Imani looked up at him, her eyes red-rimmed. "We're from different worlds. Maybe we should stop pretending otherwise." "Different worlds?" Everett stood up, pacing her small kitchen. "Imani, you're the most genuine person I've ever met. You care about things that matter. You make me want to be better than I am. That's not about worlds, that's about hearts." "Hearts don't pay the bills," Imani said, immediately regretting the words when she saw him flinch. "Is that what you really think? That this is about money?" "I think it's complicated in ways I never wanted it to be," she said wearily. "I think I'm tired of being analyzed and photographed and turned into some symbol of your charitable impulses." The hurt in Everett's eyes was almost more than she could bear, but Imani forced herself to continue. "Maybe we should take a break. Let things cool down. Give me time to figure out if I can handle this level of scrutiny." Everett was quiet for a long moment, studying her face. "If that's what you want," he said finally. "But Imani, I need you to know something. I'm not giving up on us, and I'm sure as hell not letting Sarah Chen or anyone else dictate who I care about." After he left, Imani cried harder than she had since her grandmother's funeral. Maya held her on the couch, not saying anything, just being present while Imani's heart broke. "Did I do the right thing?" Imani asked when the tears finally stopped. "I don't know, honey," Maya said honestly. "But I know you did what felt necessary to protect yourself. That's not nothing." 3 days passed without contact. Imani threw herself into her tutoring work and graduate school applications, trying to forget the way Everett's eyes crinkled when he laughed, the way he listened to her students read with the same attention he'd given her that first night. On Thursday, she was helping Marcus, now 10 and reading at a 7th grade level, with his book report when her phone rang. The number was unfamiliar, but something made her answer. "Is this Imani Carter?" The voice was crisp, professional. "Yes, who is this?" "This is Rebecca Martinez from the Bridges Educational Foundation. We met during your interview process. I'm calling because we've received some concerning information about your personal relationships and how they might impact your potential role with our organization." Imani's blood ran cold. "I'm sorry, what?" "We've been made aware of your association with Everett Cole and the questions surrounding his foundation's funding priorities. We need to discuss whether this creates a conflict of interest." After hanging up, Imani sat in her car outside the community center, shaking with rage. This had to be Sarah's doing, attacking her professionally because she couldn't get to Everett personally. She was still sitting there when another car pulled up beside her. Through the passenger window, she saw Everett's concerned face. "Maya told me where to find you," he said, getting out of his car. "She's worried about you." "They're trying to cost me the job," Imani said without preamble. "Someone called Bridges and suggested I might have conflicts of interest because of you." Everett's expression hardened. "Sarah, you can't know that for sure." "Yes, I can. Because I just came from a meeting where she offered to make all the negative publicity disappear in exchange for a merger between our companies and a more suitable personal arrangement." Imani looked at him sharply. "What did you tell her?" "I told her that she'd grossly underestimated both of us if she thought we'd cave to blackmail." Everett sat on the hood of his car, suddenly looking tired. "Then I called my lawyers and had them start an investigation into who's been feeding information to the gossip blogs. Everett, you can't go to war with other business owners because of me." "Watch me," he said simply. "Imani, I know you're scared. I know this is complicated and messy and not what either of us signed up for. But I also know that I've never felt about anyone the way I feel about you." Something in his voice made her turn to really look at him. "How do you feel about me?" "Like I'm home," he said quietly. "Like all the success and money and recognition don't mean anything if I can't share them with you. Like I want to spend every day for the rest of my life hearing about your students and your dreams and whatever book you're reading." Imani felt tears prick her eyes. That's not fair. You can't say things like that when I'm trying to be practical. Screw practical, Everett said, sliding off the car hood and moving toward her. I love you, Imani Carter. I love your passion and your integrity and the way you make me want to be worthy of you. I love that you sat at the wrong table and changed my entire life. Everett, I love you, he repeated, framing her face with his hands. And I'm not letting anyone, not Sarah, not the gossip blogs, not your fears or mine, destroy what we have. Before she could overthink it, Imani kissed him. It was fierce and desperate and full of all the words she couldn't say. When they broke apart, both breathing hard, she rested her forehead against his. I love you too, she whispered. That's what makes this so scary. Love is supposed to be scary, Everett said, holding her close. It means it matters. So what do we do now? Now we fight back, Everett said. Together. We tell our story on our terms. We show people what this really is. Two people who found each other by accident and chose each other on purpose. And if that's not enough, then we'll figure out plan B, he said, with a smile that made her believe anything was possible. But I have a feeling we won't need one. The next morning, instead of hiding from the attention, they decided to embrace it. Everett arranged for a feature interview with a respected business journalist, not about coal technologies or merger rumors, but about their shared vision for educational equity. Sitting in Everett's office, Imani talked passionately about the literacy gap and the importance of community-based programming while Everett discussed his foundation's commitment to funding grassroots initiatives. The thing people don't understand, Imani said, is that systemic change doesn't happen from the top down. It happens when people who care about communities work with those communities to identify what they actually need. Which is why, Everett added, our foundation is committed to funding programs designed and implemented by people like Imani, educators who understand the challenges because they've lived them. The journalist, Rebecca Wong from Business Weekly, smiled. It's clear you two have found both personal and professional common ground. But critics suggest that mixing romance with philanthropy could compromise objectivity. How do you respond to that? I'd say that caring about outcomes personally only makes you more committed to getting them right, Imani replied. Some of the best partnerships in history have been between people who shared both love and mission. Plus, Everett added with a grin, if falling in love with an educator makes me more invested in education, I consider that a feature, not a bug. The article, when it came out a week later, was everything they'd hoped for. Instead of focusing on their differences or the drama surrounding their relationship, it highlighted their shared commitment to educational equity and their complementary approaches to creating change. More importantly, it prompted a flood of inquiries from other educators and nonprofit organizations interested in partnering with the Cole Foundation. We did it, Imani said, reading comments on the online version of the article in Everett's living room. People are actually talking about the issues instead of gossip. We did, Everett agreed, pulling her closer on the couch. Though I have to admit, I'm enjoying the comments calling us relationship goals. Imani laughed, feeling lighter than she had in weeks. Don't let it go to your head. 6 months later, they were back at Meridian, this time at the right table by design. The Imani Carter Literacy Initiative had launched with full funding from the Cole Foundation, and early results were exceeding all expectations. Bridges Educational Foundation had not only offered Imani the position she'd originally interviewed for, but had also proposed a partnership with her new program. I have something for you, Everett said as they finished dessert. If it's another newspaper clipping about the program, I'm going to start charging you rent for space in your ego, Imani teased. Better, Everett said, pulling a small velvet box from his jacket pocket. Imani's breath caught. Everett. I know it's only been 8 months since you sat at the wrong table, he said, opening the box to reveal a stunning but understated solitaire ring. But I've never been more certain of anything in my life. I want to spend forever with you, Imani. I want to build programs and change the world and argue about movie endings and watch you make every kid you teach believe they can be anything. Imani looked at the ring, then at Everett's face, seeing her entire future reflected in his eyes. Yes, she said simply. Yes to all of it. As Everett slipped the ring onto her finger, Imani thought about all the small decisions that had led to this moment. Running late to a date she hadn't wanted, sitting at the wrong table, choosing to trust a stranger with her story. No regrets about the wrong table? Everett asked, as if reading her mind. Just one, Amani said, kissing him softly. I should have been late more often. Around them, the restaurant buzzed with quiet conversations and clinking glasses. But for Imani and Everett, there was only this. The perfect rightness of finding love in the most unexpected place, and the knowledge that sometimes the best things in life come from the most beautiful mistakes. If you enjoyed this story, kindly like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell for more. See you next time.